Welcome to the Restituto Orbis channel. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to turn our explorations to looking at films, and one of the reasons we want to look at films is that we see many pop culture references. Exploring all scenes, plots, references, and locations in the old world in films, the old world in the movies. This is part of a weekly series that the channel will be conducting. The intention behind it is to examine all the references, scenes, plots, and even locations, whether they be established sets or location shooting, where we have the old world in films. And the reason for this is that a lot of our society and pop culture is reflected within films. It's reflected in what the nature of the plot of the film is, the characters, what sort of situations that they endure. A lot of films are either derived from myth or novels or adaptations. Some are written from screenwriters, although we seem to be in an era where we have a focus on either a derivative of an existing plot, a remake, a reimagining. I'm not going to say a recycling, although at times it can certainly feel that way. The real intention of these videos is to take a look at some movies that you may or may not be familiar with, look at the plots and look at the sets and the locations and see what sort of old world references there are in films. And you may be surprised to learn that there are far more references than we were initially aware of. And there's certainly the aspect of how films have been used and changed over time. And we know in World War II there was a propaganda aspect that was very obvious and people admitted, especially after the war was over. And now we seem to believe that we're in a modern time where there is no propaganda in films, and films don't have any sort of message they're trying to tell us. Of course, we know that's not true, but it's important that we remain aware of that and we try to remain objective, especially as we look at these older movies and we examine what they're trying to tell us. What's the intention of the story? What's the intention of the struggles that the characters endure? We begin with the film Intolerance in 1916. It's a 1960 epic silent film directed by D.W. Griffith. Subtitles include Love's Struggle Throughout the Ages and A Sun Play of the Ages. Very interesting because remember with silent films we had nothing but subtitles, there was no dialogue. D.W. Griffith was known for the film Birth of a Nation, a very controversial film released in the early 20th century. Intolerance was a colossal undertaking featuring monumental sets, lavish period costumes, and more than 3,000 extras. There was a lot of extras to hire at that time. The lot on Sunset Boulevard featured a Babylon set with 300-foot tall walls as well as streets of Judea and medieval France. So that's a set you're looking at there. Incredible. Incredible that they were able to build that and have that structurally sound to where all those extras could actually stand on it. They certainly didn't have special effects at that time, and they did not have computer-generated imagery. The total cost of producing Intolerance was reported to be close to $2 million, including $250,000 for the Belshazzar feast scene alone, an astronomical sum in 1916. But accounts for the film show the exact cost to be $385,000, or about $10 million today. Let's think about that. How many films could we make today with this kind of production value and these sort of sets that we could do it for $10 million? That's very interesting. It shows that there's clearly something that's changed, or perhaps these aren't the facts. We'll have to look into it further. Planet of the Apes series, 1968 to 1973, a science fiction series focused on time travel, future evolution, and a destroyed society. Prominently featured the role of religion and adherence to government authority, which was a plot point that ran throughout the series concerning both the human civilization and ape civilizations, respectively. It explored many concepts referring to the old world. You can see some of the destroyed imagery of New York City and then a Forbidden City in one of the subsequent sequels. One of the sticking points of the series was the debate in society, the values of technology, and the conflict between fate and the power of humanity to overcome it. 5 movies, so they cranked out a movie every year, and the series was known for the classic rule of sequel, which was diminishing production values for diminishing returns. So each sequel you make, you put a little less money into it, a little less effort, and you get a little less money in return out of it. Nevertheless, this series was very profound, and we know it continues to this day, of course, with our remake and reimagining of the current Planet of the Apes series, featured prominently in the 2010s. In any event, some of the imagery and a lot of the character struggles you find that endure through the series is, do they have the power to change fate? Is there an aspect of fate? And then what does it lead to? A lot of the imagery, especially of the destroyed New York City in the bottom right, is reminiscent almost of the ruins in Cappadocia. And that segues into The Land of Doom, a 1986 film featured on one of the earlier videos on this channel. Science fiction post-apocalypse film from 1986, and it was filmed in Cappadocia, Turkey. It displays the ruins of society from a nuclear war using the fairy chimneys as a backdrop despite having a limited budget. One of the things you can tell, and you can watch this movie on your own, is the filming locations are incredible, and it really gives a reflection of a destroyed society and destroyed buildings. And why is that if these fairy chimneys were created by natural forces? The movie itself, well, this isn't a film review channel, but I would just say that I enjoyed watching it for a lot of the scenery that it showed, and it reminded me of when I was actually in Cappadocia. They did a brilliant job on location scouting for this film, and I'm actually surprised that more post-apocalyptic films have not been filmed in Cappadocia, because you already have that view. You already have that appearance of a destroyed society, especially with all of the post-apocalyptic films that have been popular for decades. You can see in the lower right a little bit of the brick road, and Cappadocia was featured in a John Levi video, and I featured it in one of my videos as well. And it's always a very interesting place, especially when you compare and contrast the fairy chimneys, which are shown in the picture up top, that are purported to have been created by natural forces, and compare that with Ukasar Castle. Metropolis, 1927. This is one of the founding science fiction films, and it's considered as influential, if not more so, even than 2001 for its time frame. It depicts a struggle for a society and people to find their identity. Interestingly enough, it features the new Tower of Babel, and that's over in the right. There are a lot of interesting scenes, sets, and plot points within this movie. And there's a lot of theories that this movie might have been from a different time or even a different society or civilization. I don't know if I'm going to go quite that far in going with that theory just yet, but it is a remarkable movie, and a lot of the depictions and imagery in it is just something that is very otherworldly. Yet, in some ways, there are aspects of it that feel familiar. You have to remember that this movie was made in 1927 in Germany during the period of the Weimar Republic between World War I and World War II. And one of the central themes of it is a struggle for the people who control this futuristic city and the workers who make this city operate. There are a lot of amazing depictions of both robots and futuristic vehicles and buildings. And it's interesting how we see such an amalgamation of both futuristic design, and yet you can even see some aspects of old world architecture within it. Segueing into the Golden Compass. Now, I'm well aware that this is currently a TV show called Dark Materials. Golden Compass is a 2007 fantasy adventure film directed by Chris Weitz from a screenplay by Weitz and based on the 1995 novel Northern Lights by Philip Pullman, which itself had a little bit of controversy based on its topics. In summary, the movie depicts another society and another world where people have spirits represented as animals, and a plot point concerns separating people from their spirits. For our purposes, the imagery from the movie that came out in 2007 is just remarkable. Again, you see that incredible hybrid imagery of what potentially an old world society or city could have really looked like. And you even have the airships that are featured prominently within the movie as the primary mode of transportation. It certainly inspires the imagination, and that's what we have to use if we're going to conceptualize what an old world or a Tartarian city could have really looked like, if it in fact did exist. I found this movie was very useful in getting some ideas of what it could look like. You have the domed Capitol there, you have some more modern buildings, but yet these more modern buildings still retain the aesthetic beauty that seems to have been lost when we underwent our brutalist, as we call it, architecture focus in the 50s and the 60s and the periods of urban renewal, where we changed the visual appearance of buildings to be more functional, more block-like. Thank you for joining me. Please ask questions, explore your existence, and you'll restore the world. Please like, comment, and subscribe.